thank you for that. There we go, I've got to hold this right up to the mouth, so it may not be about things in some respects. So good morning everyone, and welcome to our quarter economic briefing for quarter 2 2024. For those of you who don't know, my name is Chris Fletcher. I'm the policy director and the director of the Greater Manchester Local Skills Improvement Plan, which is a bit of a mouthful here at the chair. It's good to see so many of you here today. Before we start, I'd just like to thank our sponsors today, Intercity. James is going to say a few words in a minute to sort of set the scene around that, and I'll also be on the panel after we've heard from Subra and the main presentation about what's happening here in Greater Manchester with the economy. Housekeeping, we're not expecting any fire alarm tests or anything like that today, so if the alarm does go off, please follow a member of staff for the emergency exit and Muster Point is outside Starbucks on Deansgate. But hopefully we won't need any of that, but just in case we do. So, what we're going to be doing today, we've got, like I said, James is going to say a few words in a minute about Intercity technology and what they do, which is absolutely really, really good stuff and very relevant as well. We're then going to have the main QES presentation from Subra, Deputy Director of Research and Information Systems here at the Chamber. We've then got a panel discussion. It does mention Pauline on there, she's probably just thought, oh my god, I didn't know I was on the panel. Don't worry, Pauline, you're not on the panel. But Pauline here is Senior International Trade and Customs Advisor, because like a lot of these other QES presentations, there's always some questions about international trade that comes up. Despite what the political parties will have you believe, international trade is an absolutely critical issue for a huge number of businesses at the present moment in time. And the way that, and I'll say it, Brexit being brushed under the carpet is just simply not acceptable. You can't turn a blind eye to it. You've got to tackle that head on, and the way that they deal with it at present leaves a lot to be desired. I'll stop saying that for a fall off the soapbox, but it really does make me wonder what's going on. But anyway, we will have a panel discussion around that. So there's a lot to fit in. We will be bringing general election in. It's only a week off. Hopefully you've all registered to vote, or we've even got the postal vote off. I set mine up over the weekend, so please remember to vote. I'm not going to tell you to vote, it's your decision, but please vote. That's the main thing, I think, in this election. So we're bringing that in at times throughout the event, but we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We're going to cover a lot of issues. We have got a live stream, so if anybody is watching this live and you've got some questions, pop it into the chat and we'll try and get round to them, and we'll also have a chance for you to ask any questions at the end of it. So without any further ado, as I said, what I'd like to do now is introduce James to again from Intercity Technology to give a bit more idea and set the scene about some of the things that they do. James.
Thanks, Chris. Hello everyone, great to be here part of the event with QES. So as Chris said, my name is James, I'm from GMCC Technology. We're based over in Warwick and Bolton. We've offices in Birmingham, Bedfordshire and Northampton as well. We've been a part of the Chamber for the last 4 months, so relatively new to the Chamber. Now I'm here today to talk about the impact of AI in business and growth, which is really relevant as part of the QES AI is probably one of the most significant commercial opportunities in the current economy. And the people who are sceptical about that, I completely understand. But the analysts like PwC, talk about a 10% increase in GDP by the end of 2030. So it's really real, it's here. Intercity, we're a managed service provider, and we recently acquired a business called Centrality, and it's the Centrality logo. We're nothing to do with a train company, just to clarify, as I mentioned once or twice already this morning, I think it's a common thing over here. We've got around 350 employees, and that gives us real scalability and depth and technical knowledge back to our customers. We've been around for 27 years, so I'd like to think by now we're pretty good at what we do. We provide cloud security services, managed IT services, and comms as well. And we manage and support anything from the device to the cloud, so your mobile, your laptop, desktop, right the way through to the cloud, everything in between. And we manage that securely. We're in the lead Microsoft security partner. We've got a number of Microsoft competencies there. We're one of the best at what we do in the country. It's probably only a dozen other MSPs with that level of qualification with Microsoft. So we're really well placed to provide services into our customer base. And that customer base ranges from SMEs through to big market, through to enterprise, public, private, and charity sector. So we've got a real bird's eye view over a number of different markets and segments. And that gives us the capability to collect data, intel, provide that back to our customers as consultancy services. We're a 24/7 business, and that's becoming more and more important, I think, especially with the rise of cyber risk. Cyber hacks tend to happen out of hours, when everyone else is in bed, if cyber criminals are not interactive. So the fact that we're working round the clock out of hours gives our customers peace of mind. So, AI, is it just a buzzword? A lot of people, as I say, are sceptical about AI, but ultimately, AI has been around since the 50s, and it started becoming more prevalent in business through the 80s, the 90s, through the 90s, and now it's more mentioned than ever before. Previously, it was kind of reserved for the bigger organisations that had R&D, that had budget, that could use that technology to leverage their scalability, their efficiencies. Now, it's accessible. Some of the big houses out there, the likes of Microsoft, make it more accessible to every single employee in the business. And ultimately, it's that harnessing that power. And you talk about the power of AI. If you were to read a book every day from birth to death, 24/7, average lifestyle, you read about 8 billion words. AI applications read about 8 trillion words a month. So, in terms of power, knowledge, scalability, and depth, it's exceeding human capability across a number of areas. So I see AI as currently in the home as like a digital companion. So you think if you cook at dinner, you want to think, well, tonight you can ask Siri, Google, Alexa. It's going to be the same within the workplace where you can ultimately ask applications for help, for support, to complete smaller tasks that typically would take you a long period of time. Good examples would be creating proposals, creating business cases. I was speaking to a gentleman earlier who said, you saw someone create a proposal, write an article in seconds, typically speaking, take half a day or longer. So it's about doing things more quickly. And it won't always be perfect, it's important to say, that's where human intervention comes in, tailor and tweak and make it relevant and correct. And ultimately, it'll make every single person more efficient. I'm going to talk about Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI application. And from a cost point of view, it's like £19 a month for a license. So you don't need to gain much efficiency, much time back to pay for yourself, but it is about using that. It's not just about turning on and paying £19 a month for a license and expecting great things to happen. It's about harnessing its power, setting it up correctly, making sure the right data rules are in place. A good example would be if you turn Copilot on today in your organisation, it will scrape all the data and have access to all the data in SharePoint. Therefore, if you've got someone in the business who wants to quickly tap into Copilot, show me everybody's salary within payroll this month, it will pull that data. So ultimately, you need to work with IT consultants or manage it internally to really harness the power and make sure you've got the right data rules set in place. There's a short video I'm going to play which highlights some of the risks around AI, especially in the cybersecurity sector. Hackers now are using AI at great depth to be more intelligent, to properly enhance efficiency and risk. that's a quick, brief example of where I am using cyber to advise some of the hackers and phishing scams. Interesting enough, that whole video end-to-end was made with AI. Typically speaking, that would take days for a marketing and media agency or part of the business to put together. That's a couple of hours. So it's about doing things more quickly. Which I'm very passionate about. And he talks about the risk of phishing there. We do a lot as well about our consultancy services, is training. We talk about the human firewall. The biggest risk in most businesses is the people within that business. It's people who click on links, who download articles, documents, that pose the risk that ultimately give hackers access to the data. So yeah, we spend a lot of time training our customers, their employees, ultimately roll out risk. 30% of employees report scam or email, start offering on risk indicator, and that's what we do very well. So, if you're interested in learning more about AI, if your business AI ready, it's very much here, so it's high on the agenda for most organisations at the moment. Get in touch, we've got a stand at the back, we can talk about a free Microsoft and Copilot readiness assessment. We do have our customers, so we can get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A couple of phrases, new phrases I've not seen before: phishing as a service and ransomware as a service. Everything has a service, it seems these days, but I've never put that into consideration. Obviously, for people out there who want to do that sort of thing, it's their business, anyway. So, quite thoughtful about it, and also a little bit worrying as well, how easy that can be in some respect. So, thank you, James, and thank you, Institute, once again, for sponsoring today. James will be joining us in a minute. But first of all, in person, not AI generated in any way, shape, or form, it's Subra. I don't know if you're going to stand up before. He has got a foot injury, hasn't he? So he probably it's all. But it's fine. It's okay. Just put me poked. So, I'll over to Subra now for our quarterly economic briefing with the quarterly economic survey results. Subra.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special day because I usually do the 3 years as many of you know about rating the stress of most data. This is the only research is a science center. And I'm not very students because the highlight of the 3 years for me is usually. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, sorry,
It's not
change microphones. Okay, that's better. Mr. Jones, what they are. But, first of all, good morning. It's good to see so many of you, and I see some faces that I see often, and that's very pleasing. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you, James, for the presentation. It was very insightful. I was actually listening to a radio program on AI this morning, and the Uber driver was scared. And he was saying, what if there are autonomous cars? What happens to me? So I said, well, actually, we might have autonomous cars, but you might still need to be in the car to make sure that nothing wrong happens. So he was actually quite pleased eventually at the end of it. I managed to did not leave his profession. Okay, so on to the QBS now. So many of you know what the QBS is, but many of you are here attending for the first time. The Greater Manchester Quarterly Economic Survey is part of the UK's largest and most reliable business sentiment business confidence survey. We do the survey in Greater Manchester, but we also coordinate the Northwest. So I either run the surveys for some of the other chambers in the Northwest or process the results. That then goes off to the ECC. The national results, as you know, are used by various decision-making bodies such as the Bank of England, Treasury, the OECD, etc. It is also the primary source of economic intelligence for Greater Manchester. So we do feed the results into the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the 10 other local authorities in Greater Manchester. Okay, so before I go on to the current quarter, just a quick recap of where we were at the end of March, so the end of the first quarter. It wasn't a great quarter, the first quarter of this year. The Greater Manchester Index, which is our composite economic indicator, was at 3.7. And that 3.7 level was significantly lower than it has been for quite some time. However, things seem to have gone around. And so, the headline, I think, is that the Greater Manchester Index for this quarter is at 30.6. So that's a 23-point increase, or 27-point increase from the previous quarter. So there seems to be a lot of optimism that is returning. I think consumer confidence is high. I'll speak about that later. But it may also be a product of two other factors. Number one, I think because we had a technical recession in the second half of last year, minus 0.1, I think, in Q3, minus 0.3 in Q4 2023. There was probably a lot of postponement of business activity, perhaps even purchasing decisions and recruitment activity. So a lot of activity which perhaps might have taken place in the first quarter seems to have been pushed into the second. So that clearly has had an impact. And I also think the fact that we have general elections coming up in a week's time and the expectation that there might be a different direction of travel probably is affecting confidence. But remember, this is your data. I'm sort of trying to make comments and analyzing your data. So please, if you do have any feedback or comments, feel free to let us know. So in Q1, we have 0.6% growth. Again, there is an element of the low base effect because we were at minus 0.3, before that we were at minus 0.1. So that percentage growth does tend to be slightly higher, a bit more pronounced. And then in the 3 months between Feb and April, we had 0.7% growth as well. So again, that is good news. A lot of the growth that took place actually took place in the month of March. It was the very end of the financial year and beginning of this quarter as well. Relatively good performance for both services and manufacturing in the previous quarter, 0.7% for services. Services is very important, 80 to 83% of the UK economy, but also the Greater Manchester economy. Manufacturing, we were 1.4%. And I think there was a manufacturing team that was running through this morning's presentation. Now, we also have some other indicators for the month of May that comes from the Standard & Poor's Purchase Managers Index. Those numbers are looking pretty healthy. And the previous data actually backs that up. So we have complementary data sets here. So for services, the PMI index was at 52.9, slightly lower than it was in April, but nonetheless that is still much higher than it was in the first quarter, right? But manufacturing and construction are at the highest levels that they have been for about 5 to 6 months. So that number of 51.2 and construction 54.7. Those are actually pretty good when we compare those numbers with the first quarter of this year, and certainly the end of last year as well. And remember, the PMI indices anything above 50 indicates growth trajectory, and anything below 50 indicates contraction. Okay, so moving on then to some of the QES measures. So let's first look at domestic demand and overseas demand. Just for the Greater Manchester region as a whole, so this is not broken down by sectors or anything. But what you notice here is that those lines have just gone upward, right? For the latest quarter, we see an improvement for manufacturing, which is that solid green line. We also, for domestic sales, and we also see that improvement for domestic orders. And a similar story in international trade. So international trade, as Chris pointed out earlier, is extremely important. It has been at very low levels. International trade activity has been relatively weak towards I think from 2023 onwards, probably leading into the first quarter. So the fact that those balances have now turned solidly positive is actually good news. However, this is what the data is showing across the board for Greater Manchester, and there are some nuances there. Okay. So let's look at the same data from a sub-regional perspective. So this is the domestic sales and export sales data broken down for the Greater Manchester regions, sub-regions. So we have Greater Manchester North, which is the 5 boroughs of Wigan, Bolton, Bury, Oldham, Rochdale. Greater Manchester Central is just the city of Manchester. And then Greater Manchester South is Salford, Bradford, Stockport, and then Tameside. So, a slightly contradictory picture when it comes to domestic sales and export sales. Now, if you follow that magenta line there, which is Greater Manchester Central, actually we see a slight quarterly decline. But then if you trace it back to the end of last year, we have actually had 2 quarters of decline now on domestic sales in the city centre of Manchester. On the other hand, the North has actually gained, and gained significantly. and the quantum of movement is the maximum in the north. So from a balance of close to -18 in the last quarter to +35 in this quarter is actually pretty robust. And it's very healthy growth. And then you look at export sales, and what we see is a similar picture for the north. So from a negative balance of -25 or so to +15, that's very good in Greater Manchester North. Manchester Central seems to be okay as well. But then look at the great orange line for Greater Manchester South. That has actually gone down in this quarter. And so the question is, why might that be when we have an improvement in international trade activity, that we have an improvement in also customer demand as we have seen across the board? Why do we have these different pictures? I think it comes down to the sectoral makeup of these different areas. If we think about the north particularly, Wigan, Oldham, Rochdale actually have a very strong manufacturing base. So when the manufacturing sector does a lot better, the Greater Manchester northern boroughs also do a lot better. South has got a slightly higher degree of reliance on international trade activity. We have logistics hubs, Trafford Park, Airport City, but also the airport itself, based in Greater Manchester South. And so that has actually probably had a slight dip. I mean, it's relatively stable, but it's just a marginal dip. But what I would have expected to see is a boost. And then I look at the sectoral breakup of these measures later. But what we see is that the B2C services, hospitality, retail, seem to be slightly lower performing at the moment relative to the B2B services. And where do we have the highest concentration of B2C businesses? It's in the city centre of Manchester, right? So when we see the B2C services slightly struggling, you also see a slight decline in activity in Manchester Central. So when looking at the data from a sectoral point of view, so this data breaks so it's still domestic demand now, but broken down by three broad groups. Services, which is the largest group, it's got everything, the B2C services, the B2B services, but also logistics, arts, entertainment, etc. So it's a pretty broad group. We have construction, and then manufacturing and production. And again, I think the highlight in both of those charts for domestic sales in this quarter and advance orders in the next quarter is all about manufacturing. So we follow that solid green line. When you look at domestic sales, manufacturing quarterly sales have been relatively low now for 4 quarters. And then you see that significant boost now in this quarter. So from a balance of around -15, straight up to +40. Okay. Significant increase in activity in the manufacturing sector this quarter. Now the one thing that obviously comes to mind is this a flash in the pan? Is this a 1-quarter boost, or is this actually going to be sustained? That remains to be seen. But I think we can pass on the sunlight at the moment. The fact that the manufacturing sector has actually had a turnaround. And a similar situation again for manufacturing when it comes to advanced orders as well, from a balance of -25 to +35. So again, significantly good growth there. A similar picture, but again, if you look at services and construction, the amount of growth is on the lower side, but they have still grown. It's only services when it comes to the advanced orders where the balance is still below zero. Right? So the zero line in the middle is actually quite important. So anything below zero indicates contraction, and anything above zero indicates growth in the case of these QES charts. Okay, so that's the sectoral picture. The headline is around manufacturing. So what does the corresponding national data tell us then? So I've got the indices for the broad sector groups again, manufacturing and production, services and construction. And then I also have retail sales in this chart. But let's look at the first one, which is the sector indices. These data points are out of date. I think that is something I should have mentioned earlier. The QES sort of is well ahead of the curve because we do the field work, the analysis, and the launch of the results in the same quarter. So these results for this quarter that ends at the end of this week. But then the national data is about 2 months out of date as a minimum, but sometimes in 6 months out of date as well. So we have data for the month of April. That's the last data point that we have. So when we look at services, as I said, probably the most important sector for the UK economy, because it's well over 80%, there has only been a slight increase between March and April. But overall, there has been a steady and slight increase over several months now. And then when you look at the construction and the manufacturing line, the big growth has been in the months of March. And I believe when we look at the data from May, in probably 2 months' time, we will see that actually May has been a pretty robust month. Right? But in April, there was that slight decline. Okay. So the corresponding national data, we only have it for April. But let's get retail sales now. And I think there is a very interesting picture here in retail sales. So a couple of things to point out. I've got the data for about 6 months there. April, I believe, if my memory serves me right, was a very wet month. And when you have a lot of rain, you actually do see a reduction in B2C activity. So hospitality spend and retail spend tends to go down slightly when we have bad weather. So, unsurprisingly, there was a decline in retail sales value and retail sales volume in the month of April, but then look at that turnaround in May. So retail sales value went up, again, this is an index number, so anything above 100 indicates growth, went up from 116.3 to 120.4, so 4.1 increase, but the value, that's the value, the volume only went up by 2.8. So what is that trying to tell us then? We have had a reduction in headline inflation, right? So it's now on target, 2%. But the retail sales data shows us that prices for retail goods are still going up. But the good news then is that irrespective of that increase in prices, we tend to be consuming more. So we actually have a slightly, in the latest month for which we have the data, we have had a slightly higher increase in prices. And yes, relative to the volume, because that has gone up by only 2.8 points, prices are going up, but people are still consuming, which means there is a lot more consumer confidence now in the economy than we have had for some time. So again, the question is, how does that square up with the cost of living prices that everybody talks about, right? Clearly, there is a lot of consumer confidence and propensity to spend as well. And I think there might be a reason for that. Number one, it's that low base effect, postponement from April into May, that has certainly had an impact. But the second thing I think is actually very positive, which is pay rises. In the month of April, we actually had a big rise in the national living wage and national minimum wage, right? Good news if you're an employee at that rate, but bad news for your cash flow as a business owner, right? But nonetheless, that has actually put more disposable income in the hands of people, number one. And probably it's the beginning of the financial year when many businesses offer pay rises anyway. So I think disposable incomes have gone up as a result of pay rises, so people have more cash. The cost of living pressures are certainly easing. We saw energy bills go down in April. There is the expectation that energy bills will go down next week. And so there is consumer confidence. So people are willing to spend, irrespective. So the cost of living prices, certainly, it's true, I'm not denying that, but despite that fact, there is a lot of consumer spending at the moment. And the UK economy, I think it's about 67% of the UK economy is based on consumption. And so when consumption goes up, the economy does receive a boost as well. Now, exactly, probably not. We need to have a lot more public investment, business investment as well. But for now, it's heavily reliant on consumer spending. Okay. I've got some more national data there. I'll ignore the manufacturing data because when we go to the first quarter, you will have the slides and you can produce them at your leisure. But the service sectors, so that's a chart on the right. Again, we have data going into April. We can get the data for every service subsector, but I have chosen 6 for a reason. The 2 lines at the bottom includes IT, but it also includes media, marketing, and those types of occupations. That's where we have had the maximum growth consistently. So, right? Good news to you, James, because there was a lot of IT spending, a lot of spending on digital activity. That number has consistently been about 120. Likewise, professional, scientific, and technical services, that includes accounting, it includes legal, but also laboratory services. That number has been consistently about 110, right? And the latest value is 150. The public services, both health and other public services, are sort of medium level performers, so the index numbers are around 104. But what you see is that weakness in B2C coming into this quarter. So it's hospitality and it's wholesale and retail, which are slightly weaker at the moment, at least they were at the beginning of this financial year. And that, I think, is where we will probably see a further turnaround. Because if consumer spending goes up, then those numbers have to turn around. But the interesting thing is that despite the level of consumer spending that we have had, those B2C sectors are still below 100, right? So they're still in contraction rate. And we would like to see them return to growth. Okay. So moving on to international trade then. Export sales and export orders, the data is broken down by the two broad sector groups, manufacturing and services. We have seen that turnaround again. So manufacturing export sales in the quarter have gone up. Advance orders in the manufacturing sector have also gone up. And a similar situation in services. Now we do export a lot of services. The UK is one of the largest exporter of services in the world, led by financial services, professional services, and those types of B2B sectors. And that, if you look at the advance orders from overseas customers, that balance has gone from -20 in the previous quarter to +20 in this quarter. So a significant boost to the services sector coming from overseas. Now, how does that square up with other aspects of international trade? Actually, they are. If you look at the long-term trend, we have slightly weaker levels of international trade. Right? So it's a long-term trend that we are concerned about. So we are not still realizing the potential here. Okay, so export sales, there is some good news. Hopefully, Pauline will be able to provide some additional insights on this data. So we also have the data for UK exports and UK imports. That also comes from the Office for National Statistics. The data is available only until the first quarter. So this data can be broken down by EU exports, non-EU exports, EU imports, non-EU imports. I want you to just look at these numbers, right? So to the 27 countries in the EU, in the first quarter of this year, we exported 366 billion. And to the rest of the world, it's probably 3 times or 3.5 times as many countries, we exported 425 billion. If you look at our imports from EU are significantly higher than the imports that we have from non-EU countries, right? And that sort of highlights the importance of smoothing any barriers that we have for trade with the EU. We import a huge amount. We export 60% of what we know, 60% of our overall exports actually goes there. And so we actually need to do a lot better on trade with the EU countries. It is extremely important, and that should be a priority for any new government that comes to power next, let's say. It's getting the trade barriers down so far as the EU trade is concerned. We do have new free trade agreements, but those are honestly insignificant because the trade with some countries is so small that a free trade agreement is not going to make a huge amount of difference. Right? Okay. So looking at some of the other macroeconomic measures, cash flow and capacity utilization. Again, the story is very similar. We have had that turnaround in this quarter. Manufacturing cash flow positions have improved significantly. It was, all 3 sectors had negative balances when it came to cash flow positions in the last quarter. Manufacturing has gone up from -5 to +25. Services and construction have gone up. But again, you see the pressure of those national living wage, national minimum wages. Now, which sectors are the most impacted by that? It's probably logistics, it's hospitality, retail. Again, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be pay rises, but from a business point of view, the ability to manage cash flow when you have a 10-11% increase in wages is actually going to be quite a challenge. Which is why we still see the services balance slightly below zero. So the ability of those businesses to manage cash flow and turn to positive cash flow is still a bit constrained. Capacity utilization has also gone up. It's a very important macroeconomic indicator because the higher levels of capacity utilization, the more likely it is that we will have business investment. Right? So which is why, and of course you need the cash to invest as well. So cash flow and capacity utilization go hand in hand. We have seen an improvement in capacity, but it is hovering at about 50 to 60%. Right? And we have seen capacity utilization at 80% to 90% in some quarters. Primarily pre-Brexit quarters. So again, capacity utilization, but we also have COVID instance, so capacity utilization across the economy is slightly on the lower side. We would want to see those numbers increase from the 50 to 60% that they are at now to 70, 80%. And that would then lead to further business investment as well. So, talking about investment, what's the situation now? There has been a turnaround. So, from the previous quarter, for both manufacturing and services, it's only construction, which is reporting a slight reduction in business investment on capital goods. So, the chart on the left is machinery and equipment, predominantly capital expenditure. So, we've seen that. There has been an improvement in the manufacturing sector, so this is why I keep saying that the manufacturing sector is a sort of behind. And again, I do think that some investment which should have taken place in the first quarter seems to have been postponed into this quarter. Now, the interesting thing about that capital investment piece is that in the previous year, the first quarter of 2023, we actually saw a significant boost in business investment on capital goods. And that happened because of the super reduction scheme which was available then, right? And the super reduction scheme was going to come to an end on the 31st of March of last year. Since then, the Chancellor has announced the full expensing scheme, so a similar scheme is available. It was initially meant to be for 2 years. It's now been extended. It's probably going to become permanent. You can use these assets within the full expensing scheme, and you can also use eligible digital investment as well, because digital investment was not part of the original super reduction scheme. And yet, we did not see a significant increase in investment in the first quarter. And that probably is because of the uncertainty at that time. We had a technical recession in the second half of last year, lots of uncertainty about economic performance going into this year. And so, the fact that has picked up now is with both services and manufacturing actually showing an increase. And likewise, we have also had an improvement in training expenditure. Training expenditure is actually quite important. Probably the result of two things: buying new equipment, probably needs spending on training as well. And of course, when recruitment activity takes place, you've got more people on board, you will need to spend on training. So where does that leave us in terms of business confidence? A slightly mixed. The ability, the optimism that businesses have, and the fact that they can maintain their turnover, is that chart on the left, the confidence in turnover, and all three sectors are reporting that they are able to boost confidence and boost revenues in the coming months. And again, look at that turnaround in manufacturing from a balance of around plus 18 to about plus 17. Significant turnaround for the manufacturing sector. I do hope that sustains. Construction has also had an increase, but the challenge with the construction sector is not necessarily turnover. It seems to be margins and profitability. A consistent issue that we have discussed before. I think there was an elaborate discussion on this at the construction summit that we had last month. Again, the issue of profitability, margins, the cash flow pressures, some of the cost pressures and labor pressures within the construction sector were discussed extensively at that time. So that sector has had that margin challenges for quite some time. Now, the other sectors have been volatile. If you look at the chart for the construction sector here, so staying around between 20 and 30 percentage point mark, and then we have seen that decline in the latest quarter as well. Okay. But when it comes to the other sectors, again, there has been an improvement. So business confidence is up. That's what we've reported. If you think it's otherwise, tell me now. And then recruitment. So we have seen an increase in demand. We have seen an increase in capacity utilization. We have seen an improvement in business confidence. There's no surprise that recruitment activity has gone up as well. So the percentage of businesses that reported that they have tried to recruit in this quarter is around 80%, 80+% for construction. It's close to 80% for manufacturing, around 50% for services. Again, those are pretty decent numbers. But the interesting thing then is that it's not just in the quarter. Actually, many businesses in manufacturing and services also expect to increase their workforce in the next 3 years as well. So again, that balance has gone up from the 10 to 20 in the previous quarter to 60 nearly for manufacturing and 40 for services. It's only construction that is actually reporting that there might be a slight decrease in recruitment activity in the next quarter. But overall, employment seems to have gone up. There might be still some pressures within sectors which have been particularly adversely affected by the rise in national minimum wage wage. I have heard some anecdotal evidence about that. It might also affect other sectors, especially at the entry-level roles, where some people might still be paid at or slightly above those national living wage, national minimum wage prices. Bringing them something we can pick up later. So on the whole, there is this turnaround. That brings me to the final issue that I wanted to discuss, which is around prices and business concerns. And again, there is something really interesting happening here. So the context again, the question in the QDS is, do you expect to increase prices in the coming months? Now, if inflation is going up, if the cost of input materials, the cost of labor, etc., are all going up, then you would expect a business to put prices up, right? But we do have decreases in headline rates of consumer price inflation, but also decreases in the levels of producer price inflation, which particularly affects the manufacturing sector. But if you look at that line, the solid green line for manufacturing, in the last 2 or 3 quarters, we have had a steady increase in the proportion of businesses who say that they will have to put prices up. So there must have been a lot of pressure and stress on that sector last year. That's probably going to change, but prices are still going up. Right? So there are still some price pressures within that sector. Construction and services are reporting a decline. But in services, it's only a marginal decline, so I would say it's fairly stable. So the proportion of businesses that reported that they've increased prices is pretty much the same as they were in the previous quarter. So that's on prices. So what about business concerns then? So the QDS question has got 6 options. It's a multi-select question. But the interesting thing for me was that even now, inflation is the primary source of concern for businesses. So there are still some cost pressures, evidently, in your day-to-day activities. That could be labor, it could be cost of materials, it could be the cost of services that you procure, it could be because of international trade, because when we import goods, if the cost of shipping, etc. is high, then we do end up paying slightly more. But inflation is still the primary source of concern for businesses. Now, there are other concerns. Concerns around interest rates have gone up, and the orange line at the very bottom, that's exchange rates. The exchange rates, concern around exchange rates have also gone up. But there is something else here, which is around competition. So that solid black line in the middle is competition. Now, from a macroeconomic point of view, increase in competition is good because it means that there are more and more businesses actually trying to do things. But if you operate in a sector where competition is going up, it may not be great news, it may not be welcome for you as an individual business, but from a macroeconomic point of view, it is actually great news. But I just want to focus on that issue of inflation, interest rates, and the prices. So what we do know is that in the month of June, so last week, when the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England met, they held interest rates at 5.25%. But we do expect a decline later in this year, probably coming as soon as August. So there has been a lot of debate on this, right? So why has the Bank of England held the rates? I have a partial explanation. This is by no means what might have led the Monetary Policy Committee to actually vote the way they did to make their decisions. But a couple of things. Number one, exchange rates. The pound has been fairly stable against the US dollar for pretty much all of this year. It has actually strengthened against the euro. It has strengthened against other currencies as well. Some exporting countries have had their currency values fall, so there has been a depreciation in countries like India, China, etc. So the value has gone down slightly of their currencies, so the pound is doing relatively stable. Now, when the value of the pound is actually quite strong, our imports are relatively cheaper, and our exports become slightly harder. Right? But what does interest rate increases do? Interest rate increases actually prop up the currency value as well. So hold that thought. But we also have inflation being reported as the primary source of concern. Right? And if interest rates went down, we would actually see a reduction in the value of the pound. Marginally, the cost of imports will go up. We import a huge amount of goods every quarter. 1 trillion almost. So there must be something that actually led the Bank of England to make the decision that they did, which is hold the interest rates at 5.25%. That will indirectly support the pound. It will probably address some of the price pressures that businesses are facing now. But it does not help the cost of business investment because you can't raise finances. And even personal loan rates now are probably twice that they were 12, 15 months ago. Credit card rates are certainly high. Business financing is certainly at least 2 percentage points higher than they were at the same time last year and so on. So it does not help the cost of business investment and addressing cash flow. But from a macroeconomic point of view, addressing inflationary pressures is important, and that probably is what led the bank to make the decisions that they did. Okay, so that brings me to the very last slide, so a quick summary and a GDP forecast. So we do have some economic challenges despite that growth that we have seen across all the 3 sectors. In this quarter, we have seen an improvement in business confidence in Q2. Now, while the election may have added a degree of uncertainty, it is also likely, as I said earlier, the expectation that, and I also expect a different direction of travel from next week. So that expectation is probably causing some optimism as well. But there is just one thing to point out. If you look at the policies of all the parties, they all want to invest a lot more. They do not want to cut public spending, and equally they do not also want to put up taxation, right? Those 3 things are mutually exclusive, as we know. So there is a very high chance that something will have to give. So taxation might indeed go up later this year. We might have small cuts to public services here and there, probably not significant, I don't know. But we can't invest a lot more because the debt is still at relatively high levels. We do have a slight deficit as well, but we do expect a general change in the direction of travel after the elections. So there's an important issue to bear in mind. Now, inflation is now a target, but core inflation is at 3.5%. So core inflation is inflation excluding the price of food and energy. So that still stands at 3.5%, and the service sector inflation is actually much higher. It's now 5.7%. It didn't go down as much as it was expected to go down. But then we also have some complementary factors which will help it in the coming months. Energy bills going down much longer. But I think one of the key concerns for us in Greater Manchester and in the Northwest will be, will a new government actually invest in infrastructure here in Greater Manchester? Right? We have numerous challenges. The Castlefield corridor has been a burning issue, I think, for about 13 years now. We have cancellations of infrastructure projects like HS2. We still want non-powerhouse rail. It takes as much time to drive now as you could walk. So our roads are congested. So we do have all of these different challenges, right? So we would need to see a significant increase in business investment and public investment, particularly on infrastructure projects. That I think would be a main ask. Chris will elaborate on our campaign purposes later. So where does that leave us in terms of forecasts? Now, considering the improvement in business activity in this quarter, economic forecasts have been upgraded ever so slightly. So we expect the UK economy to grow in 2024 by between 0.6 and 0.9%, 0.9% being the upside scenario. And then for this quarter, the second quarter, growth is expected to be between 0.3 and 0.5%, 0.5% being the upside scenario. So clearly, there is some good news in this quarter. I'll leave it there and hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Subra, for that, and also well-worthy round of applause for that. Looking at some of those graphs, I do get the feeling that somebody's got the Greater Manchester economy and dropped it on the trampoline, and it's suddenly gone back up that way. So really, I start the results in that pleasing, obviously, and obviously Subra's done a great job in explaining some of that around there. We'll dig into that in a little bit more detail in the panel discussion. I'd like to ask James now to come and take a seat at the front, and we'll give Subra a chance to catch his breath a little bit after after that. So James, I'm going to ask you the first question, if I may. And it's about some of the points you were making in the presentation about what you do in Intercity. And where are you seeing the main sort of driving points now in the business? Because obviously the adaptation of technology is going to be even more important in the future. Where are you seeing the main focus on that from business now, and why is that?
Yeah, AI is definitely up there. I think that's becoming more prevalent very, very quickly. People are asking us about it more and more. You see it in the press, you see it in the media, the importance of it. The guys are out there saying that it's going to drive, high percentage growth over the next few years. And I think it's about marginal gains. I think you look at Copilot and AI, it's not going to solve everything, but if it can give you a few percentage points advantage against your competitors, then it'll move you forwards. It'll drive profitability, it'll make you more efficient, it'll keep your staff stickier and happier as well. They'll stick around, I think, because they're also spending their time doing things that are more interesting, more complex. We see more investment in people as well, training, development, leveraging technology to do some of the more basic, low-level tasks, and letting people do more complex stuff that they're there to do.
I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because people just think, oh, AI, going to take my job or whatever it is, but it's actually the flip side, isn't it? There's a phrase, I use this now, I've used it half a dozen times, I've almost worn it out. I don't remember who said it, but it was about AI and saying AI is not going to take the job, but somebody who knows how to use it will. And that's the key thing, I think, isn't it? From the AI perspective, are there any sort of sectors that are moving into this more than others? Because obviously people just assume, they're just digital companies. Actually, this is right across every sector, isn't it?
Yeah, I think every business has customer service to some degree. And I think that's where it's probably being used earliest. Things like chatbots. I think we're all used to jumping online and getting questions answered quickly by a chatbot now. That's the direction of travel for a lot of businesses. So businesses that have customer service, which is most, they're certainly using that area, I think, more predominantly at the moment. Media companies, tech companies are very much embracing the technology because they see the value in it probably first, and that adoption of the technology then filters down into their partners, their customers, and that's what they're seeing.
And then the other bit of that is, of course, is people coming into the workplace now are probably expecting it to be there, but obviously there's a big challenge of people currently in the workplace, and again, that thing. What experience or what are you seeing from some of the businesses that you work with, or how that gets introduced? Because you need, I guess, a firm bit of leadership. If you're in an organisation and you're going to start to go down this route, you need a leader rather than a manager to actually make some of those changes real for people.
Yeah, there's a stat on one of the slides there that talks about recruitment, and I think genuinely in the next 12 to 24 months, you'll see candidates come to the business and ask if you're using AI, if you're using Copilot and applications like that, because they'll see the value in it. They might have used it in a different organisation, and they'll ask if you're doing the same because they know it'll make their life easier, it'll make them more efficient, it'll make them better. So I think you'll definitely see that. But it's going to be about the training and the harnessing of the power of AI, really understanding how it's relevant to you as a business, because you might just think, AI, what is it? Is it Terminator? Is it the Matrix? Is it some big nonsense thing that people just talk about? But I really do think in the next sort of 2 to 5 years, genuinely, day-to-day working habits will change.
And what do you see as the next sort of, I don't use the phrase, the next big thing in this arena? What's the tipping point almost where it becomes, I still think a lot of businesses see this as something we should be doing rather than we need to be doing it, maybe, I don't know, but what would you see as that sort of tipping point where suddenly everybody gets it? Because I think the last point we made is quite relevant. People are still sort of like, no, we don't trust it, which isn't right. But what is that tipping point that will make it mainstream almost?
Yeah, it's going to be adoption. So I think people start to use it, and it's about seeing those little benefits. And as soon as you start seeing that, it's a bit of a snowball effect. You think, all right, I get that, I understand that. It's helping you do X, Y, Z. What else can it do? How else can I use it? Working with and maybe internal IT departments, consultants to say, you know, this is our business strategy. How do we get there? How do we get there more quickly? How do we be more profitable? And I think you'll see in the market as well, everyone has an eye on their competitors, see what they're doing, and there'll be a bit of a kind of crescendo of, all right, we know that they're using AI for X, Y, Z. You know, how do we implement it?
We saw the numbers on one of the slides that submitted about the level of growth and business being done in the sort of IT and the digital sector. Is that your experience of what you're seeing now in business?
It is, yeah. It's been an interesting sort of 24 months in IT and the tech industry. We definitely saw a boom during COVID. Some of the big vendors, manufacturers, carriers hired en masse. The last 12 months, they've seen a lot of turnover and exit. So a lot of employees have been made redundant from some of the, you know, the big guys. I think the people in that next step down, the value-added resellers, the managed service providers, they're the guys who really see growth. We managed to pick up some, you know, great recruits because some of the bigger companies have exited them because the numbers haven't been where they needed to be. COVID ultimately drove the technology sales massively. You know, everyone went and worked from home, everyone needed a laptop, connectivity, everything else wrapped around that. So revenue jumped, and a lot of people employed, you know, probably overemployed. So some of the bigger businesses I think have struggled over the last 12 months, it's fair to say. Whereas where we are in this arena, you know, we've really seen growth.
Excellent, thanks James. So I'm going to come to you. We were going to have a third panellist, Sharon Seville, who was our former Stockport president and also managing director of First Commercial Recruitment. Unfortunately, Sharon's ill, so couldn't be here today. But I'm going to ask you the question, so I was going to ask Sharon. And it's a point you raised and mentioned a couple of times. And I know there's somebody sat in the audience today, which I won't mention names, but it's about the bit around the impact of the national living wage rise. Not just that, but set in the context of everything else that employers are being asked to do. How much of a problem is that for businesses? Because the problem is, you get an employer making very, very valid issues, and we can see this over the costs. People go into businesses more than effectively can afford it. Can businesses carry on affording it?
I think businesses can continue to afford it only if I think we are all expected and are able to pay much higher prices for the goods and the services that we consume. So that's one thing. Now, there is an interesting sectoral makeup here. So one of the sectors that is badly affected is health and social care, right? So there are many social care workers who are actually paid at the national living wage. The margins for that sector are anyway on the lower side. So what we have had is a 10% increase in wages. Actually, it works out at close to 11%. I think it was from 9.9 something to 11 pounds per hour. So it is actually a significant jump. Now that's for several employees. But you may also have had other employees who might turn around and say, why did they get a 10% increase? Why am I not getting a 10% increase? And I've got only a 2% or a 3% increase. So that actually causes problems in terms of industrial relations as well. So it's not a great thing. But I think, you know, we can afford it if we are all willing to pay much higher prices. And I think it comes down to that, because we've clearly seen the impact on cash flow. We have seen the impact on, probably anecdotally, heard that there are some businesses which are actually pausing recruitment or are reducing hours, so that their overall wage bill stays the same. They do have to pay higher prices, but they're actually limiting the number of people who might be working at any one shift. Right? So you might have things like that. Now, I mentioned health and social care because it's indirectly funded by the public sector. And we have also had other issues like the budgets for councils, which predominantly fund that, actually being slashed significantly over the last few years. And then when councils try to put council taxes up, obviously there was a lot of outcry out there. So we do need to square that circle. It is going to be immensely challenging, but it is going to cause a lot of pain in the short term.
Okay, and again, the thing is, it's not about, don't, every single person speaks to do. It's got to be done in a realistic way, and for that, you've got umpteen other things as well that are being put on being laid at the door of employees to do. Speaking to an electrical contractor a couple of weeks ago, you know, one of his employees hasn't paid his council tax and said the local authority chasing after him. The employee now has to deduct what he's owed from his wages. And you start thinking, well, it's almost like a local government employee as well as being an employer and doing anything else. So there's all these examples floating around there. We've actually picked up on this in our campaign document, which I'll move on to in a minute. Said to government, you've got to get realistic about this because every government department's got their own thing that we want employees to do. What a surprise, nobody looks at it in its entirety and say, hang on a minute, this has got to work in a completely different way. So that's hopefully something will change. Maybe not, who knows, depends on who gets in. Has anybody got any questions for James or Subro? Lady at the back, I'll come with my microphone. They're walking around.
Hi, my name is Sandra from the Hill Group. I'm an international headhunter. One of the things that surprises me about the councils is they just put the rates up. They send us a bill that tells us what they're spending the money on. But if they show, like, if you go to a pub and the bar manager says, we'll put the prices up, he'll explain it's cost of wages, it's electric cost, it's the rent we're paying. The council don't explain that. They don't tell you, our costs have gone up by this amount, this has gone up by this amount. Do you think that maybe if they shared more about that, we wouldn't mind paying extra for the council tax?
Communication is always good, isn't it? Having said that, I think there might be different examples of this. So when I get information from Salford City Council, I can solve it. They do very explicitly mention that their budgets have gone down by about 245 million per year. Right, over the last 10 years or so. They do really mention that it's come up again and again. So I guess there are different examples. Now, if they did a lot better in terms of communication, does that give us a choice? Actually, we don't have a choice when it comes to council tax, so we do have to bear that in mind as well. But ultimately, there are two things which I think have affected. A lot of investment has been driven in the UK by very low levels of interest rates, right, over the last decade or so. We have also had effectively negative interest rates in some quarters. So that clearly is not sustainable in the future. COVID was a bit of a highlight on that. And we also know that there are wide levels of inequality, especially on some of those sectors which are funded indirectly or directly by the public sector. So those aren't great, but I completely agree with you. Councils do need to explain why the rates are going up.
Yeah, I think so. And don't even get started on business rates because that's a whole other world of Chris, you might have something to say about business rates. Oh, no.
Chris and I help people reduce business rates and I've been doing it all my life. The principal reason why our business rates go up is because grants come down and councils have a 40% reduction in income at the same time as having more and more responsibility for welfare and all the other things as well. And the money that you pay in business rate does not go to the council anyway. It used to at one point, it's going on to the government. But the one thing I was going to say in a link to that is that the rents in industrial properties have rocketed. That's a massive pressure, and that puts pressure also on business rates because they're linked to rents. And the government, Mr. Huntington, sort of announcement he made by saying that we're not going to increase the rate of the pound this year, last year. What they didn't tell people was that the revaluation increases became much steeper in how they were implemented. So that is a big pressure. But my point of origin was actually about the pound. When I was a child, which is probably before Edinburgh run, I think, and looking around on we used to have half a dollar, which was 12.5 pence, half a crown. So the dollar was $4 to the pound. And now we're down at 1.20. And if you go back to 2007, I bought guitars actually. I did import a guitar at $2.20 to the pound at one point before Lehman Brothers collapsed. So when I hear you talking about the pound and it's been strong at 127 on the 128, that it went down a long way when Brexit hit. Now suppose the Labour government then starts changing the way that we deal with Europe, whatever that might mean, and makes trade easier, the pound's going to go back up again. More than expect. So what's the impact of that going to be? From a business point of view, when I go over to the States on business, I now pay £50 a day for a car, I pay 20 for it. So on that side of things, it's good if the pound goes up. But what's the impact going to be the other way around if the pound goes back? Historically, the last 20, 30 years, it's been about 165, 170, it was. What happens if it goes back up there?
So the interesting thing is that I think every country is trying to strike a balance. Because if you look at the way the US economy has functioned, their exports have actually grown. Their imports have also gone up as well, significantly, especially the imports from the Far East. So when I was talking about the pound, I was actually talking about the last 6 months, but yes, historic context. I did have a loan from India when I came to study in the UK. It was a long time ago. But at that time, the £1 was 70 rupees. It's now 107, right? So I couldn't afford it. I mean, many people couldn't probably afford it, studying from abroad. So, yes, the pound actually being strong does have some benefits. Imports, I think, is where it's probably going to have the best impact on, because you can actually import a lot more goods at much cheaper prices. That's going to address inflation. But where we might have a challenge is on exports. And the interesting thing in the UK is that, I've mentioned this before, every politician wants to have export-driven growth, right? But it's not that easy, because we do value addition here. We do not have natural resources in the UK. We do not have rare earths. We do not have some of the minerals and the metals that actually go into even the production of semiconductors, electric vehicle batteries, etc. So we actually need to import a lot more to be able to export more. We need the value addition as well. So for all of that, I think the pound is actually going to be quite critical. Will it go back to 1.5, 1.6? I think it's going to take some time for this.
Okay, thanks for that. Just got time for one more question. I know Graham had his hand up, so I'm here.
Thanks, Chris. So Graham Dixon from S3 Warehousing. This is probably to James, and also Chris, you might have a view on this as well. Are we seeing AI taught as a mainstream subject now in schools, colleges, universities, so everyone is learning about it, or is it still very much a specialist subject? Thinking about that from a recruitment point of view, are all potential recruits going to have AI experience, or is it going to be very much a narrow field of candidates?
Yeah, fair question. There are specific degrees now, so if anything, that the learning degree programs in schools within technology is definitely growing. I think there's a few things that play into that. I think Gen Zs and Gen X, they're used to using tech day in, day out, so they can live and breathe it. You can give those 5-year-olds an iPhone and they'll navigate their way around it. So I think they're naturally more capable at younger age anyway. But then when it comes to the finer skills, the deeper skills within tech, yeah, I definitely see that we're investing in universities and schools and colleges within that area, and that we've got specific AI programs. Businesses as well, so we get involved in something called a head partnership, where we work with schools and colleges to help upskill from a technical point of view, especially disadvantaged people and children. And I'm always surprised at the level of capability that they come in with. I see them stand up and present in front of our business in the full board, just as well as some of the people who've been in our business for a long period of time. So naturally capable, I think, is certainly a baseline. But businesses, universities, the education sector investing in programs are essential, and I think we definitely see more and more of that happening.
Yeah, back up, obviously through the work we've been doing with the local skills improvement plan, obviously, AI is that it wasn't funny enough much of a thing, wasn't it, not so when we first started to do the LC. But as we went through it, the last 18 months, it's actually it's an offer, and that was one of the key elements in that. I mean, there's a couple of things great to hear what James said there about what they're doing as well, but I also think there's still also that sort of basic digital skills bit, where we still hear a lot from employees saying, well, the recruits is something you can't really use out, but there's that bit there as well, the critical bit around, what you actually need to do with that going forward. We ran an event this week, on Tuesday, I think it products now, and it was looking around some elements of AI. It was quite interesting. There was somebody there from one of the universities and said, well, AI is great, all the students are using it, but actually they're writing more essays quicker. So in other words, what they're doing is they're using it, but they're not thinking about it. Now that's the bit that makes the difference. I could go down now and do Copilot to whatever it is, but it's a load of, or it doesn't fit right, and that's the problem. And I also think they're better at prompt engineering. That's the other big thing in this, because that will tell you what you need to be doing, you know. And it's interesting because I just think it's changing almost before our very eyes with some of this as well. I'll take one more comment and I'll stop because we're a little bit out of time. So.
I just quickly wanted to answer that. I work for the University of Salford, and 5 years ago our data science course had 70 students a year undergrad, and now it's 400. So there's massive appetite. Loads of jobs going, loads of sort of requirements for people with those data science, AI skills. But yeah, we are having an issue with the students producing rubbish, I'll say, so that's all.
There you go.
Just to add to that as well. So it's a good point, and the whole debate around is it going to come and take our jobs? No, on mass, no, it's not, because AI isn't perfect. It doesn't write perfect essays, it doesn't create perfect media content. But it starts doing that lower level stuff pretty well, and then human interaction to tailor, to tweak, to make it as good as it could and should be. Yeah.
Just one final comment.
Very quickly, thanks. Single and it's a question to you, James, primarily. The challenge with AI that I observe is, we should be doing something, but I don't know what. So there's actually a vast industry that is developed, coaching and consulting with clients, don't know what to do, but have got some idea that they should. The big challenge appears to be that using the inbuilt ChatGPTs and the many different variations are all historic. And they completely negate your IP, they completely negate the way that we have done business for the last year. The Chamber has done business for 230 years. Where's the vault that is actually in the Chamber's own AI system? And I'm hearing that more and more money is being put in to getting companies of any size, it could be a one-man band or a large company, to actually create their own AI models so that their intellectual property and their content becomes available to everybody. And what doesn't become available to everybody, it becomes retained by them.
Yeah, really valid point. So, as a business, we ban using ChatGPT because you're right, that's open source AI. So that means whatever you put into it is there online forever. So if you put your own IP information in, put custom data in there, it's out there then. So anyone can draw on that. So we're quite specific. I mean, if you're using Copilot 365, it pulls on your internal data, your internal resources from SharePoint, not scraping your whole internet. So it's important to set rules and process and procedure internally as a business to make sure you're not falling foul of sharing your IP and using it in the right way ultimately, training your people to use it right.
Okay, thanks very much. And thank you, Subra, and thank you, James, and once again, thank you to the city for sponsoring today's event. We just show our appreciation to excellent, and James and colleague will be around a bit, and Subra will be around as well, and I'll be around as well in case you've got any questions. The other thing I just want to finish on is we mentioned it a few times as well, but we do have the general election next Thursday. You may want to be aware of that, hopefully you are. It'd be pretty difficult to have ignored it. Here at the Chamber, obviously, we do a lot of work around the policy side of it, the lobbying side of it, making sure we're identifying what you, our members, are telling us are the things that matter to you, the issues you want to see resolved, and how we can take that forward. So we did a document before the mayoral elections was only last month, it feels like about 3 years ago. We did it before the mayoral elections in May, and we've updated it. Now, our campaign for business document 2024. And this time we've called it the plan for growth, and as well as the local issues that we will be calling on the mayor and combined authority to sort out, we've put the national level issues in there as well, as they've said. So you've got that mix of national and local and some explanations. It's under 5 themes: skills, connectivity, net zero, trade and business conditions. Business conditions, not whether or not you've got aircon in your office, that's quite nice at the present moment in time. It's more around the things we've been talking about, where the extra bits that businesses are being asked to do. It's about business rates, it's about those type of things, the day-to-day issues that impact on every business, no matter what you're on. It's up online, we launched it last week. We'll send a link through to you. So that document is out there. Now, what we're going to do with it is, we're going to do more with it after the election, which may sound a completely contradictory thing to do, but we think it's important that we've got 27 MPs in Greater Manchester. We think it's important that on day one they get a copy of that campaign document, and they also get a copy of what we've just heard today around the QES on their desk, in their inbox, or whatever mechanism you use. So they know from day one what the current state of the local economy is, and they also know what the issues are that businesses want to see them tackle. So we're going to do that after the election. We're going to keep that a live document. We're going to keep that going throughout the rest of the year. So please look out for that. It's so important that if we do get a change in government and whatever shade, colour or whatever it is that we get come 5th of July, that they are completely in tune and know what it is that the businesses in Greater Manchester want. And if we can support that through the excellent links we've got with Andy Burnham and the rest of the combined authority, then really we should be in a really good place here in Greater Manchester to get what we actually need to make sure we can get that economic growth. You know, succeed. If you're in business, you live here, you work here, or whatever it is, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing for Greater Manchester. So look out for that. We'll send a link out to you after that. And that's all that remains to say. If that sort of stuff really interests you, politics, it can be interesting, believe you me. It's not just about people shouting it on another and putting up daft promises about all sorts of things. Pretty good stuff. We've got our summer assembly on the 12th of July, when we'll be looking at what we've got from government, who's going to be key players within that, and what we're doing with our campaign document going on. So that's the 12th of July. I'll look out for it on the event page, and you should have that there. It'd be great to see and really for that. So it remains for me to say is thank you very much for showing up today. It's been another fantastic event. Thank you once again to James and his city for sponsoring that. Really good discussion. If you've got other stuff you want to talk about afterwards, please feel free to do so. But all that remains for me now is to say thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of the day and have a safe journey back.